Well, we're here at the workbench, and it's time for rigs and techniques. And Dave, it's time for you to earn your keep.
Well, I'm going to try. I like to fish with frogs. We're talking about fishing with frogs because it's about that time of year. They're starting to fire off, like all the boys have said. Hey, and you can throw a frog in the morning, and you can throw a frog all day if you want to. You might not catch as many as the other fellow who switches, but if you keep throwing the frog, you're going to catch a big one because big things eat these bigger baits. And most of the frogs are bigger. You can throw little frogs too, but usually what the advantages of these frogs are is you can throw them in places. They're very weedless, and you can throw them into places where you can't usually throw a lot of other stuff. And that gets you in front of a lot of fish that other people can't get to, and it also gets you in front of bigger fish.
Right.
And plus the bite is spectacular. I only fish for seeing the bite much anymore. I mean, I like to catch them, but I'd like to see them eat.
Right.
Even when I go blue marlin fishing, I like to see them pounding on the teaser. Well, to me, to get a frog, just to get them to bite it a couple of times, I don't even have to catch them. But because I want to catch them, I'm using pretty heavy gear. When I usually am using a bait caster when I'm throwing a frog, a sizable one. I actually use a giant saltwater. It's actually an ambassador. It's a giant Revo one, and it's a monster. It's made to catch big saltwater fish. But this Akuma one will be just fine. But it's it's a big reel, and it's got a lot of drag because if you're pulling a big fish out of this heavy cover, you need to have a lot of torque, and you need to get them out of there. And sometimes a spinning reel is not as good.
So what size diamond braid 8X would you put on?
Well, I like to use
40,
at least 40 to 60.
65 maybe.
I guess so. You're probably not going to break the line. You'll probably end up tearing the bait out of the fish before you'll break 60 pounds.
Right.
That's heavy stuff. But you'll be able to jerk them out of there. And you need a good stiff rod with a little bit of flex at the tip, because again, when you haul back on them, especially if you're tied straight with braid straight too, you've got no stretch. So you have a good chance of jerking that thing right out of his mouth. And if you have a little section of mono, you get a little bit of cushion. Not a whole lot. I don't know how much a 2-foot stretch or 3-foot stretch of braid, a piece of mono is going to stretch, but it's enough. And that light tip will save you as well. And when you're fishing in that really heavy stuff, that's what you need. You need to be able to pull them out. And
so what are some of the other frogs that you like?
Well, there's several different types. There's the collapsible frogs, these realistic, or those aren't. That's just a rivet frog, or a hard, like a creature frog. That can be either buzzed on the top,
like a buzzbait.
Like a buzzbait, if it's got the little curly tails on it,
like
or
the bass ass
like that logger toad.
Yep.
You can that thing swims, or you can put it on a Carolina rig, and drop it down and get underneath and fish it on the bottom, a couple feet off the bottom. Those solid body frogs are good for that, and they're really good for buzzing on the surface as well. When they're really popping on the top, you can really buzz those frogs and with the little spinners on their tails there, and get a bite. Now these are the more realistic frogs. You probably want to work those a little slower, in the vegetation. Throw it right up in the stuff. I tell people, to work it as slow as you can, and then get slower and slower. It
looks like Brie running down to the boat early in the morning.
You can really leave one sitting for 30 seconds or more. Give it a little twitch, let it sit for 30 seconds, and then the next time you move it, just give it another little tiny twitch. This is a popping frog. This is a frog that's made to pop. It's just like any topwater plug. You can use that when they're biting shad on the surface, or just about anything, because it makes a pop. Now it looks like a frog, so you can throw it up into the vegetation, and it's weedless because it's got the 2 hooks and the soft body, so it collapses when they bite it. But again, if you throw that thing out there when they're biting shad on the top, they're going to eat that too. Most of the time, we say that these are all frog baits and that the fish are eating a frog. Well, I guarantee you a lot of times they have no clue what that thing is. It could be a little mouse, a little duckling. It's just something that's moving across the top of that mat, and they want to get it because it's moving and it's smaller than they are, and that's what they eat. Now, like Matt was saying before, a lot of these solid body frogs, if you put a nice heavy weight on there, you'll notice that when a frog is sitting on the surface, and if you spook a frog, he goes straight to the bottom. I mean, he puts his head down and he goes straight to the bottom like an arrow. He goes fast. Well, if you put a nice weight on the nose of some of these solid body frogs and throw them and punch them through that mat, they think it's just a frog that got spooked and is heading for the bottom, and they'll eat it. Just like
great reaction.
A lot of those big swim jigs, you know, those big purple looking jigs with that looks like nothing that they see on a regular basis. I guarantee you they think it's either a bait fish or a frog that is spooked and is heading to the bottom, and that's why they get eaten. Now you got a lot of other stuff like this. You know, I put this one up here for effect more than anything else, but they do make frogs with little lips on them like that in the front that could actually swim as well. You know,
wobble.
A smaller frog, kind of like an arbogast, you know, the old blackbird and stuff. Yeah. Well, they have the same little things they'll put on the front of a frog and make it swim back and forth and walk the dog just like any other ones. This, if you notice, this one here has little spinners built in to the back of the frog. You know, so you can just buzz this one across the surface. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they think that's a frog or not, but it's something that's going buzzing across.
Frog eating me.
They want to eat it. So.
All right, well, it's time for us to leap over to another region. Good job, baby.
We're leaping.
That was good. That was good, Rick.